Hello, everyone, and welcome to Session 7, Building Reading Comprehension Through Writing of our Middle School and High School Literacy Teacher Professional Development Series. My name is Natalie Kleber, and my role here at the department is Middle School and High School Literacy PD Specialist. So as a recap, in our last session, we spent time applying the process of writing summaries in the classroom to support reading comprehension. We focused specifically on the 12-word trick. There were some other ones that I helped outline, but the idea of using these summaries to develop students' reading comprehension abilities by extracting the most essential information as they're reading. Today's objective is that by the end of the session, participants will be able to implement writing activities in class to promote reading comprehension. This is the third session in the series specifically for reading comprehension, and we have one more coming on the use of graphic organizers, to support reading comprehension. So we said reading comprehension is a complex process. We said that text comprehension is a dynamic and interactive process involving several sources of information and knowledge. It's involving a lot of things are happening in our brains as we read and comprehend information. Kate Kane says that successful comprehension of written text enables the reader to acquire and apply new knowledge, to experience other fictional worlds, to communicate successfully, and to attain academic success. And we said that reading comprehension is really the cornerstone of success, not just in our courses, but outside of our courses, in the job force, in college. So it's really essential to help students build their reading comprehension ability so that they can have more success. We said that this was a reminder, Scarbo's reading rope, and we said that if students have proficiency in that bottom strand in word recognition, if they have developed phonological awareness and decoding and sight recognition skills, then they're prepared to start comprehending the text. And that upper strand, language comprehension, which involves reading comprehension as well as listening comprehension, is where we can really focus and develop students so that they become more proficient and comprehend what they're reading. So we can focus on developing background knowledge in students, or vocabulary, language structure, verbal reasoning, and literacy knowledge. We can focus on all those different strands in order to help build students' comprehension. So today we're going to focus specifically on a combination of lexical inference and question generation. Although writing isn't necessarily them generating a question themselves to write about. Sometimes they can, sometimes we can ask them to generate their own prompt, but they start generating questions in order to answer that essential question. They're asking themselves, what is the most important information? What details that I've read support that? So it involves them generating some questions in order to produce the writing. Let's talk about the impact of writing on reading comprehension before we dive in specifically to how we can use writing to support it. So this all comes from Graham and Harris, but students who have additional opportunities to write evidence a 14 percentile point jump on measures of reading comprehension. So this just speaks to giving them additional opportunities to write. So in your class, if if they have one opportunity a week, or one opportunity every other week, if we give them additional opportunities, just the additional opportunities themselves with some guidance on what you expect from the writing, will produce a 14 percentile jump or roundabout. When elementary grade students who are directed to write about material they are reading versus students who may mainly read and reread or study this material, their comprehension of the text read jumps by 24 percentile points, whereas writing about content material presented in class results in a 9 percentile point jump on measures of learning. So what this means is, if we pair a text, and the text in ELA, science, social studies, and math can be something as simple as a speech, it can be a quote, it can be directives, it can be a scientific article or journal. There's so many things that comprise text. It's not just a multi-paragraph document. But if we pair this text with a writing to go with it, and this is not an essay, it could be, but it can be something as simple as just responding to a prompt, a couple sentences, then that's where that jump happens. Whereas if we just lecture, and then have them write, it's a 9 percentile point. So really the pairing of the reading and the writing from what you read is what really improves that reading comprehension. Its permanence, and we're referring to writing here, makes it possible for children to review, re-examine, critique, and even construct new understandings of these ideas. When students put these ideas into their own written words, it can help them think more carefully about what the ideas mean. And so just thinking about ourselves, even as professionals, when I have a new complex text or a journal or an article that I'm reading through, it helps me significantly if I'm able to print that out. And when I annotate, I literally have my thinking on the side. I'm writing things that it makes me think of are the most essential information. And then I might write myself a little synopsis at the bottom of it, but that's me processing what I just read and applying it to other thoughts and retaining and comprehending what I just read. And so using this process to support students in their reading comprehension as well. So we talked about this in the last session as well, but there are some steps that we should go through in supporting reading comprehension, whether we're doing it through summaries, general writing, anything we're doing to support reading comprehension, we should have some steps that we should think about. So the first thing we want to do is select carefully the text to use when first beginning to teach a given strategy. Now, writing in itself isn't necessarily a strategy, but it could be if we're focusing specifically on summary writing or something like that. But we of course want to use the tier 1 curricular texts that are included. But then thinking about diverse learners too, and maybe we need to have something paired at a different level, but it's on the same topic to build that background knowledge. So think about the text you want to use. Show students how to apply the strategy they are learning to different texts, not just to one text. So if we're doing social studies, we should do writing around primary source documents, secondary source documents. If we're talking about an ELA class, we should do it with informational texts and literary texts and speeches and all of the different types of genres. If we're talking about science, maybe we're asking them to write in regards to the data they see in a table or a journal, a scientific journal. But showing them that this strategy or this thought process works across all different types of texts, not just one. Ensure that the text is appropriate for the reading level of the students. And again, consult what we just talked about with number 1. Use direct and explicit instruction for teaching students how to use comprehension strategies. So for the purposes of today's session, we're talking about just writing in general to support reading comprehension with what we just read. But it's not good enough just to say write a paragraph or write a claim. We need to give them direct and explicit instruction for what a claim looks like or for what our paragraph that we're requesting looks like. We don't want to say just write it, because you're going to find everything from very proficient to non-proficient. We want to have a clear idea in our heads of what we want that piece of writing, even if it's only a sentence, to look like by the time they're finished, and we present that to them. Number 5, provide the appropriate amount of guided practice depending on the difficulty level of the strategy that the students are learning. So if we're just asking them to write to prove mastery of what they just read, there might not be a whole lot of guided, of feedback that's required unless they're way off base from what the main idea is. But, you're going to gauge that based on the strategy you choose. Number 6, when teaching comprehension strategies, make sure students understand that the goal is to understand the content of the text. So if they're performing a piece of writing, if they're constructing a piece of writing, make sure we tell them that it is to understand the content of what they just read. It's not just because you're getting a grade or I'm checking over your writing. It's because we're doing this so that we can make sure that you understand the content of what you just read. So just a little bit more about direct and explicit instruction and what that should look like. You want to inform students of what strategy they will learn. So if we're focusing on writing today, we're going to say, okay, guys, we are going to be writing today. You're going to write me a paragraph, and you're doing that because number 2, the second bullet says explain why it's important to learn. You're going to construct a paragraph because I want to make sure that we build our competency around reading comprehension. I want to help you understand what you're reading, and you're going to keep doing this and better understanding what you're reading. You're going to use this strategy. You're going to model the use of the strategy with a think aloud while interacting with the text. So if the text is 2 tables or 2 paragraphs, take one of those and do a think aloud behind what your writing would look like before you release them to go write about it. Let them know what your process is. Okay, I read my first paragraph with you. I am writing this sentence down as my first sentence because I think it's the most important thing. I know it's the most important thing from the paragraph because, and tell them what led to that. The more they're able to see your thought process, the easier it's going to be for them to duplicate that process as they do their own and as they come across, more reading later down the road. Provide guided practice with feedback. And that guided practice with feedback could be peer feedback. It could be teacher feedback. It could be teachers circulating and providing oral feedback. It could be written feedback depending on the task. Not every piece of writing that we give to students needs to necessarily be collected, graded, but they need feedback on it. So they need to know what they're doing well, maybe what they need to improve on. But that feedback is going to help guide them to be the best writers. A lot of times teachers might shy away from teaching writing, and it's because it's a kind of an abstract process sometimes. So the more we can model the use of the writing and the think aloud, and the more we can provide feedback, the cleaner and the more beautiful and easier it's going to become for students to write. And then you need to provide independent practice with different types of text. So writing to read. When students write about what they read, they're improving their comprehension in the areas of whatever you teach, whether it's science, social studies, or language arts. Specific ideas for writing to improve comprehension can include any of these things. So it can be to respond to a text in writing, and this could include writing personal reactions, analyze and interpreting the text. It could be writing summaries of a text like we focused on in the last session. It could be to write notes about a text, and just a few things about writing notes. I want you to think about when you ask students, maybe you ask them to read section 4 and write some notes about it. We don't want them just to pull out the third and sixth sentence of every section, right? We want them to have a process they can go through that helps them identify the most essential information. If students are consistently reading to identify the most essential information, that is reading comprehension. You're comprehending what you just read and the most important parts of what you just read. So helping them have a process for what constitutes what to note about. Answer questions about a text in writing. Those are all different ways that you can write to improve reading comprehension. When students understand the process of writing and the structure of text, they can anticipate what comes next or the flow of the text, and they create meaning from that. So of course, that's definitely going to help improve reading comprehension, right? So specific areas to teach about is the process of writing in general. And when I say the process of writing, I'm not talking about like introduction, body paragraphs, conclusion, although it could mean that if you're writing an essay, but it's as simple as a brainstorm. If they're writing more than one paragraph, students need to have a brainstorm of what they're going to do. If you notice that your students' writing lacks organization, it's because they're not really sure about what they're writing about and the flow of it yet. So teaching the process of brainstorming, writing, looking back at it and revising. How many times has your student turned in their paper and they didn't even reread it? So teaching them the process of rereading it for the purpose of asking themselves some guided questions. Did I extract the most important information from the text? Do I have substantial evidence to back it up, or did I prove it either through explanation or evidence, right? So teaching them that process and focusing on a different piece of the process each time. If I'm a science teacher and I'm asking the students to write a claim in response to the phenomenon they just observed, am I explaining the process of how to write that claim? So the process of writing, whatever process you're teaching. Text structures for writing. If students understand the structure of the text, they're better able to read it and understand it and to write about it. So some different structures might include, like in an informational text, you might have steps in the process. Definitely, yes, that's typical to science for sure. You have that scientific process that they're following. It might be a cause and effect kind of relationship. It might be a story that they're reading about and responding to in writing, but teaching them that structure and to look for the structure so they can look for it in other texts like that, and they're able to write from it. Teaching students paragraph construction. When they're writing a paragraph, the first sentence should be what we call a topic sentence sometimes, or a claim statement, or if these, you want that first sentence to be what the whole paragraph's about, teaching them that process, and then teaching them how to have enough details in there that support and prove that point or that claim. How to construct a sentence. Sentence construction skills are going to help students read and write better. I referenced on a previous slide that research shows a 14 percentile point jump in reading comprehension for students who just have more opportunities to write. So, daily when you're teaching, especially when you're teaching a piece of text that day, pairing it with a writing, even if it's a short one, is going to help their reading comprehension. They know that by the end of their reading, they're going to have to produce something. They know that they're looking for the most essential information. Consult your curriculum to determine what opportunities there are to write already. A lot of curricula ask the students to develop a CER. Definitely use those as opportunities to deliver that explicit and direct teaching so that they can produce one like that on their own, but also, pairing it with that text to help improve their reading comprehension. Consult rubrics for your content area that can help you pinpoint certain areas to focus on. So every single time students read and write, they should always be reading for the most important information, right? The most important content in that and writing about it. But you can also focus on certain things, not just the most important. So if I'm asking students again to write that CER paragraph, they need to know what's most important and what they just read and write about it. But I might be focusing on different parts of that CER and developing that. So say we've already taught how to write a claim and students are doing that proficiently. Maybe I'm moving on to how to help that evidence support the claim, but you can have a different focus each time. The focus shouldn't be everything every time. We should pinpoint something to focus on from the rubrics in your content area to develop the different components of it. Writing should always be purposeful. So for really using writing to improve reading comprehension, we need it to be purposeful. We need it to either be developing a certain skill in the writing and or demonstrate mastery of the material they read. They should always be demonstrating mastery of the material they read. And then, like I said in the previous bullet, pairing it with a certain skill of the writing. Direct and explicit instruction, once again, should always be a part of instruction when first introducing a part of writing or when working in small groups. So say that we've been working on writing just a claim, and in the whole class, students are pretty proficient with that. But I noticed I have my pocket of about 4 or 5 students who are not proficient with writing their claim still. Maybe the whole rest of the class is writing a claim for that day. And I'm pulling my 4 or 5 students back with me in the back of the classroom. And I'm showing them explicitly again, okay, this is the process we went through, guys, to write our claim. I'm going to model it again. I'm going to give them some guided practice with it, with some feedback, and then another opportunity to do independent practice. And I'm going to do this as many times as it requires for them to become proficient. If students are given that practice and that guided feedback and that modeling, they're going to progress through that skill. And it's so exciting for them because you're being so intentional in tracking it, and they're able to track it. So within writing, right, sometimes writing can be not overwhelming for just the teacher, but for the students as well. And so writing frames can be extremely beneficial for students who need more support with the writing process. And this can be for our English language learners. It could be for our students with IEPs or 504 plans, but you're giving them a frame. And I'm going to give you another slide in a second that show you just tons and tons more resources. But if you give these students a frame from what to write from, it helps them get started and it helps them figure out where or why I might find the most essential information in the passage or in the text. So here are some other resources that you can go to for writing frames. These are really geared towards the content areas, so upper grades, not K2 necessarily, but those upper grades. The last one, sentence stems, the implementation, this one actually provides a video of them using sentence stems or implementing sentence stems in an elementary classroom, as well as in a secondary classroom, and it shows you the process. Sometimes as a teacher coach, I would notice that my teachers were trying to implement the sentence frames, but they would just give them to the student. They wouldn't explain like how to fill out the sentence frame or what the sentence frame's used for. So the first time or the first maybe 2 or 3 times even that you're using the sentence frames, once again, if you could just model, first of all, explaining what it's for, but how to fill it in, it's really going to help them use that tool. We try not to assume that they're just going to know how to use whatever support or differentiation we're trying to give to them. So some next steps if they're still not progressing. So you've been teaching this writing piece. You have some small group maybe that you've been pulling to the side with you for that direct and explicit teaching again. And you notice that maybe this one student just still isn't progressing. They may need to be referred to the school's administration or SBLC team for next steps. Sometimes if students have a problem with reading comprehension, It's not just because we need to develop those upper strands of the rope. It might not be because of background knowledge or syntax. It might be because they still haven't developed their decoding or phonics or phonemic awareness skills yet. So they might need more intensive support. And so referring that to your school's administration or SBLC team could get the student the support that they need to develop those skills as well. So just some final thoughts. Writing is a great way for students to build their reading comprehension when it's intentional. You know, when we model for them our expectations around it, when it's based on a text, they're writing from what they read, it can really help build reading comprehension. Writing about what they have read allows students to determine what was most important in the text, as well as make connections to the content or just in the world, in their world. So it really helps them to process those complex texts better. Let's engage in this new learning. I want you to consider what ideas or topics are important in an upcoming unit or lesson. What text will be used in the curriculum to help students develop their understanding of that topic? What texts are coming up? What opportunities can you highlight in the curriculum for them to write? Okay, and then think about if there's opportunities to write you can add to what's already existing in the curriculum. So in my curriculum, and I was a classroom teacher for English language arts as well as for social studies, there was definitely opportunities to write embedded in the curriculum, but every single day I had my students writing. And it wasn't, sometimes it was just, like I said, 2 or 3 sentences. Sometimes it was a paragraph, but every single day my students wrote. And this really did help them develop their reading comprehension. It helped me to scaffold and to give them support around the different elements of the writing that we were doing. And it made them very, very proficient writers. What scaffolds, I want you to ask yourself, what scaffolds may be needed for students who need more support? So maybe you're teaching your writing, but you need to pair it with a frame. Or maybe we need to discuss an exemplar first and talk about what makes this great about the writing and then let them write. So consider what the scaffolds they might need to pair with that. And as always, any questions or suggestions you have, please don't hesitate to reach out to us at louisianaliteracy@la.gov. We welcome all of your questions and suggestions. And we have one more session left in this series to help support reading comprehension as well. So I look forward to seeing you again.